I'm an educator. For as long as I can remember, I have been an educator. It actually started, my first teaching experience started in the basement of my childhood home with my little brother and my little sister as my very first pupils. I loved bossing them around. My teaching career continued in kindergarten, first and second grades, where I attended a one-room country school. And there I got to help the other children, probably in a little bit of a bossy way. But the best part of that experience was that when the roads didn't get plowed, I got to spend the night with my teacher, with Mrs. Estes. And she would let me correct her papers, and I got to use the red pen. I knew that one day I wanted to be just like her. It was probably mostly about the red pen and being the boss at that point in my life, but I maintained my dream throughout childhood and furthered my skills of being in charge by being in every club and on every committee that elementary, middle school, and high school could throw my way. To be honest, it was still probably about the red pen and about being the boss. But one day, sitting in my senior government class, I realized that being a teacher isn't just about teaching lessons and correcting papers and handing out grades. That education wasn't just about school buildings and about desks and about football games. I realized that education was about something so much bigger and so much more important. I realized that the opportunity for education is a game changer. That having an education is a door opener. I realize that education levels the playing field for all. I realize that the education of the citizens is essential for a society to be robust and vital. And I will never forget what my senior government teacher told us. Mr. Haig said, "A well-educated community is the foundation of a democracy." It was right then and there that I knew that I wanted to be part of this game changer, this door opener, this foundational enterprise that we call democracy. And so I am here before you today as an educator. Not an educator that worries so much about the red pen and being the boss anymore, but an educator that embraces the immense responsibility of providing the very thing that is needed to ensure for the rest of time that the ideal that this country was founded on continues to exist. That this great country continues to exist as a democracy. I'm an educator that insisted that the words of my government teacher be memorialized in our school district's belief statements. Those important words, a well-educated community is the foundation for democracy. I needed it to be there because it needs to be the belief of not some, but it needs to be the belief of many. I needed it to be there because I feel so strongly about what Gandhi has said. Gandhi says your belief becomes your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits your values, and your values become your destiny. And I want my destiny to include the furtherance of this very important ideal we call democracy. You might ask, why am I so passionate about the propagation of this purpose of education? There's a myriad of purposes of education. Why this one? To answer that, I think we have to agree that over time, the purpose of education has grown exponentially. It seems that as society has changed and evolved, it looked to schools every single time to mirror in our curriculum and our teaching what was being asked of its citizens. Wherever there's been a major social or economic change, the goals that were established for public education changed too. Jeff gave us a perfect example of that today in his speech, that there's an expectation, and we will change in education to meet that expectation. But the one thing that has not changed since the start of this great nation is that schools must prepare students to be citizens. And I submit that that's citizens of a democracy. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, principal author of our Declaration of Independence and our third president, said that public education would be the foundation of democracy and that public education was essential for a democratic nation. To quote Thomas Jefferson, he said, "If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. The people cannot be safe without information." He felt that public education of all the people was necessary for our nation to remain free. And that's really it, isn't it? Democracy, it's about freedom, it's about respect. It is the allowance of all citizens, man or woman, rich or poor, black or white, educated or uneducated, to participate equally and freely in our government. What would our government be like if the vast majority of the people that were participating in it, to use Jefferson's words, were ignorant? Would it ensure that our citizens were committed to the ideals of democracy? Would it ensure that our citizens are committed to the work of democracy? Would they be able to operate within the democracy? I would worry that the lack of education would take us farther away from, not closer to, those important tenets. Without public education, would we, the people, be able to navigate the plethora of information that is coming to us from all directions? Would we, the people, be able to evaluate the written and oral opinions of others, the journalistic license of today's media, the photoshopped images, the pieced together sound bites? Would we, the people, be able to distinguish the reasonable from the sensational, the serious from the simplistic, the logical from the silly? We're not educated. I would worry that we would have the ability to do that. We want people to think freely. That's a basic tenet of democracy. But we need people to think critically about what they see, what they hear, what they read. That's what will keep our democracy operating. And that is why I believe that public education is so important for our democratic ways. Our country needs public education to develop citizens to understand, participate in, protect, and preserve democracy. Lots of other people believe this too. In 2003, the American Association of School Administrators did a very large poll, and they found that 95% of the people they polled agreed with this statement. We need to stand up for public education to make sure that the public schools continue to fill their role as the cornerstone of the common good, providing the foundation for the civic society that is critical to our democracy. 95%. Even in 2003, it was rare to get that kind of unanimous thinking about a political topic. And so every day, as I go to work as the superintendent of schools, I work to further the concept of my destiny, my community's destiny, that we continue to graduate students who are not only college and/or career ready, but probably most importantly, citizenship ready. Education is the game changer, the door opener, the citizen maker. If public education goes away, so does the public in terms of freedom and respect. Public education is essential because it not only serves the public, it creates the public and establishes us as a public that is grounded in democracy. There are some among us, however, that have the desire to destroy public education, and get this, they do it in the name of freedom. I think it's about the darn red pen, about power, and about profit. Diane Ravitch wrote a whole book about this topic. It's called Reign of Air, the hoax of the privatization movement and the danger to America's public schools. She took 325 pages to explain her research. I'm just going to mention, I promise, just a few of her things that she suggested in her book. She says that while the leaders of today's reform movement call themselves reformers, they are unlike any other educational reformers we've ever seen in this country. Past reformers always wanted to tweak things within the system to make it better. They talked about having better curriculum, better prepared teachers, budgets that were better targeted at needed areas. They talked about having smaller class sizes, and even at one point in our history, they talked about desegregation. with the major goal being to improve public education. Today's reformers, however, said it's too late. Everything's been tried, and schools are failures. Public schools are failed enterprise, and that everything has been tried. That's a very different kind of reform. They assert, she says, that the best way to save education is to hand it over to private management and let the market sort out the winners and the losers. They wish to substitute private choices for the public's responsibility to provide good schools for all children. That responsibility set forth by Thomas Jefferson so long ago. She says that she thinks they lack the understanding of the roles that public schools play in democracy. I disagree with her there. I think they fully understand the degree that public schools play in democracy. But I think the red pen and power and profit for them trump any desire that they have to further democracy of the people and for the people as we know it today. Some who crave the red pen want to actually destroy public education with the understanding that without public education, the divide between the educated and the uneducated, and the exactly parallel divide between the rich and the poor gets widened. They understand that this magnifies the power of the educated and leaves the uneducated powerless. We then become a nation governed by the rich. That's a plutocracy, not a democracy. Some who crave the red pen seek to create learning institutions with public dollars that use competition to sort children into winners and losers. The winners get the whole package: college, career, and citizenship readiness. The losers, well, they get some job skills that they go out into the world, and as a result, they are ill-equipped to understand or to participate in civic and political life. They become the ignorance that Thomas Jefferson so thoughtfully wanted to address through his plea for public education for all children. Some who crave the red pen, they want to create learning institutions with public dollars that limit their curriculum to their ideologies. Those things, those important tenets that they may have and that they hold tight to. Those could be anything: political, social, philosophical, any religious ideas for which public dollars are paid to perpetuate. What if those ideologies specifically ran contrary to the very basics of democracy? The basics like freedom and respect for all. The desire for the red pen can have very serious consequences for public education, and I submit for our democratic society. Once upon a time, I thought education was about the red pen and about being the boss. I'm glad I've moved beyond that myopic view today, because I want to tell you that for the rest of my life, I will be an educator that stands up for public education, and by telling whomever will listen that our schools are not failing, that this is a myth conjured up to persuade entire communities to hand over their children and their public schools to private enterprise. That this myth has been perpetuated by a well-orchestrated, skillful public relations campaign that drums into us over and over again that our schools are failing. Well, let me tell you, I'm out in schools almost every day, and nothing could be further from the truth. Our schools are succeeding, and our children are succeeding. I'm an educator that expects all children will learn, and especially children of poverty. I know that schools are the very place that will move them out of poverty because we provide stability, consistency, meals, emotional support, and teachers who care about them every so very much every day. They need public schools because children who are poor, they don't get medical attention, their nutrition isn't as good. Every day, their day is filled with disruption, stress, and crises. These factors could have tremendous impacts on their futures and on their achievement. But the public schools they will attend will help them overcome these factors and will help them do everything possible to be winners. Public schools will not and do not sort children into the loser bin. I'm an educator that will continue to help Americans resist the privatization agenda because it uses children for profit and undermines the sense of collective responsibility for collective needs. I will be an educator until the day I die because I believe that a well-educated community is the foundation for our democracy. What about all of you? Will you think of Diane Ravitch when you hear that schools are failing? Will you think of Thomas Jefferson when somebody complains about paying for the education of all children? Will you think about those 95% that said stand up for public education? Will you support this game changer, this door opener, this citizen maker we call education? Will you remember that it's about more than the red pen? Thank you for considering my words today on this very cold and frosty afternoon. And I hope I've given you some ideas worth spreading. Thank you very much.